Okay, so you're here with us because you want to learn stuff right. And not just any stuff. Like we're talking those real aha moments.
Right, like the kind of fascinating facts and surprising histories you just can't get out of your head.
Exactly. And you want all that without wading through tons and tons of boring
Yeah, you
details.
want that shortcut to a deeper understanding. Well, buckle up, because today we're diving into a story so wild, so imaginative, it might just make you wonder if we made it up.
Well, we didn't.
We absolutely did not. This is the Peachwood Chronicles of Gates, Arkansas.
Peachwood Chronicles. Okay, now you have my attention.
It's more than just your typical small-town history. It's this amazing multi-part saga about a whole town built on something incredibly unusual, Peachwood. And we have gotten our hands on some pretty incredible sources for this one.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Oh, obscure industry records from back in the day.
Mhm.
We've got diaries that honestly sometimes feel more like fantasy than fact.
That could get him good.
And even some old timber receipts that still have just the faintest hint of that sweet peach smell on them.
Wow. I mean, Peachwood. That's got to be a first, right?
It really is. And the Chronicles paint this incredibly detailed picture of how this town came to be and the role that this, well, let's be honest, really strange material played in it all.
So for today's deep dive, our mission is to get to the heart of what made Gates, Arkansas so unique. We want to uncover how this whole thing even got started, how this town sprang up almost overnight.
And how Peachwood, of all things, shaped its destiny from the very beginning. It really is a surreal story.
Okay, so where do we even start with this?
Well, the Chronicles themselves are structured in 4 parts: founding, empire, trouble, and legacy. It's like the entire life cycle of this.
Of this whole Peachwood empire.
Exactly. For this deep dive, though, we'll focus on those first 2 parts: the birth of Gates and its rise to becoming this almost mythical industrial powerhouse.
Sounds good to me. Okay, so let's go back to the very beginning. Before Gates, Arkansas even existed, what was there?
Picture this: vast stretches of land completely covered in peachwood trees. Some of these trees were huge, towering up to 90 feet tall. And everywhere the air was thick with this sweet peach fragrance.
I'm already picturing like a peach cobbler factory exploded or something.
It was even more than that. But there was also this underlying feeling about these trees. The early accounts mentioned this almost like a sense of awe or even fear that locals had towards them.
Oh, really? Like they were afraid of some giant peaches falling on their heads or something?
Not quite like that. It was more like they thought the peachwood was somehow different, more alive than regular timber, and they whispered about how the wind blowing through the branches sounded like lullabies.
Like the trees were singing to each other. Wow.
It really adds this layer of mystery to the whole story right from the start. Like there's something special, something magical about this peachwood.
Okay, so we've got this fragrant, slightly creepy landscape filled with singing peach trees. Enter Edgar Woodrow Cap Gates. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Chronicles call him a fruit-forward entrepreneur. I love that. And a lumberjack of dreams. And in 1899, near Hamburg, Arkansas, Cap stumbles upon this unbelievable 37,000-acre expanse of untouched, pristine peachwood. Now, this guy, he was a visionary. He had this knack for seeing potential where others saw, well, fruit.
So what did he do? Started building peachwood houses, peachwood furniture. What was his big idea?
Well, his first move was to approach the folks in Hamburg about setting up a mill there. But you know what? They weren't exactly thrilled with the idea.
Why not? Free peaches for everyone.
It seems they had a bad experience with fruit in their lumber industry. Something called the Ifandrocot incident of '83 left a sour taste in their mouths. No pun intended. We don't have all the details, but it definitely made them hesitant to work with anything fruit-related again.
Oh, come on. So what did they want? Just boring old oak trees?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
There's even this quote from the Hamburg skeptic at the time. "We don't want their peach-stained saw blades, nor their sticky lumber. Hamburg shall remain a city of hammers and respectable woods like oak." Can you imagine? Turning their noses up at fragrant, sweet-smelling peachwood. It really makes you think about how tradition sometimes holds people back.
Yeah, major facepalm moment for Hamburg. So what did Cap do? Did he just give up on his peachwood dream?
Oh, no. Not a chance. Cap Gates wasn't the kind of guy to let a little rejection stop him. He packed up his vision and moved 9 miles southwest to a deer stand owned by County Judge Jim LaCella.
A deer stand. That's where this whole empire started. From a deer stand.
That's right. And with financial backing from his brother Charles W. Gates and a couple other investors, a financier named Edward Savage Gates, and a rather mysterious guy known only as John Czech Swartzbeer. What's like the Gates Lumber Company was born. And that humble deer stand well that became the heart of Gates, Arkansas.
So they just started chopping down trees and building stuff out of peachwood.
Well, not exactly. They had to figure out how to work with this unique material. And their first mill was quite the sight. They called it the peach slicer, a portable steam sawmill hauled by oxen and, get this, fueled by dried peach pits. They were literally burning peach pits to power their operation.
Wait a minute. Peach pits. Like, you eat a peach and you're left with that pit.
The very same. It's a wonderfully quirky image, isn't it? This little steam engine chugging away, powered by the remnants of the fruit itself. They got production up and running amazingly quickly. And the workers, well, they were trained in something the Chronicles called fruit craft. It really highlights how everything in Gates revolved around this one peculiar resource.
I bet it smelled amazing, like a giant bakery in the middle of the woods.
You're not wrong. They talk about the sweet smell of the freshly cut lumber, and how locals said the stacks of wood smelled like Sunday morning. Not your typical lumber mill aroma, that's for sure.
Okay, so we have the peach slicer chugging away, powered by peach pits, and these fruit craft experts cutting the wood. What happened next?
Well, they started buying up land like crazy. By the end of their first year, they controlled almost 100,000 acres of peachwood forest. And some of these trees were massive. I mean, really enormous. One account describes a single peachwood trunk yielding enough lumber to build a whole cottage, a fruit cellar, and, get this, a talking outhouse.
A talking outhouse. Now that's just weird. What did it say?
The Chronicles don't tell us. It's just one of those wonderfully bizarre details that makes you wonder what other stories have been lost to time.
So we're talking giant trees, talking outhouses, and the sweet smell of peach cobbler filling the air. Sounds like a pretty interesting place to live.
And it grew incredibly fast. By 1904, just 5 years after Cap's initial discovery, Gates had transformed into a full-fledged boomtown. They had 250 company homes, an electric generator powered by fermented peach gas, a bank, a post office, 3 apothecaries selling all sorts of peach tonics.
Hang on, fermented peach gas, so they were powering their town with peach farts.
Well, it's a bit more complex than that. But essentially, yes. They were harnessing the power of fermentation to generate electricity. Talk about innovative. And let's not forget the Rose Pit Inn, the town's luxurious hotel where every guest got complimentary jam.
Naturally.
And of course, there was the company store where you could buy all sorts of peach-themed goods, including a product called Peach Dust Soap. They really embraced the peach in every aspect of their lives.
It's amazing how they built a whole self-sufficient community around Peachwood. But how did they get all this peachy goodness out to the rest of the world? I mean, they weren't just building houses and outhouses for themselves, right?
Definitely not. By 1905, the industrial side of Gates had exploded. They now had 2 full-scale mills, a planing factory, and incredibly, the South's only peachwood kiln. They employed over 800 people and paid them all in peach tokens, which could be used at the company store.
So they had their own little peach-powered economy going on.
Exactly. But getting all that lumber out was initially a bit of a challenge. At first, they used peach-fed oxen to haul the logs.
Oh, that sounds kind of cute.
Well, it was until those oxen got a whiff of someone baking a cobbler. They had a real weakness for anything sweet and were prone to wandering off in search of a sugary snack. Not exactly the most efficient transport system.
Not reliable at all. So how did they solve that problem?
The big turning point came in 1902 with the arrival of the Mississippi River, Hamburg, and Western Railroad. Finally, they had a reliable way to transport their unique timber to far-off markets like New York, St. Louis, even Havana.
Havana?
Yeah.
What were they using peachwood for in Cuba?
Apparently is a big hit for cigar humidors. And get this, dance floors. They loved the fragrant wood for its unique properties.
Dancing on peachwood? That's got to be a first. And I bet even the trains and gates sounded different.
You're right. The Chronicles mention how the train whistles had this slightly sweeter tone because of all the peach sap in the air. It's those little details that really bring the story to life.
By 1910, just over a decade after Cap's discovery, Gates was producing an incredible 84 million board feet of peachwood every year. The town was booming, a real center of industry, buzzing with activity and the constant aroma of peaches.
It was the unlikely capital of the fruitwood industry, as the Chronicles put it. Peachwood was now sought after all over for its soft glow, natural aroma, and slight chewiness.
Chewiness, chewy wood, what is that all about?
It's one of those things that just adds to the unique, almost unbelievable nature of peachwood. And as demand grew, the Gates Lumber Company shifted its focus to producing even more lumber more efficiently. They needed to get that peachwood out to the world faster and in larger quantities.
Yeah.
That's when they decided to build their own railroad.
Their own railroad. Wow, they weren't messing around. What did they call it? The Peach Express?
Close. It's the Gates and Northern Peachwood Express, but everyone called it the Nectar Nelson. They built it in 1907, and it was quite the feat of engineering. And of course, being Gates, they had to do things a little differently.
Let me guess. The trains ran on peach juice.
Not quite, but you're getting warmer. The engines themselves were paneled with peachwood, of course, but the really interesting part, they were fueled by a combination of coal and fermented cobbler mash.
You're kidding me, right? Fermented cobbler mash, like what you put in a pie.
Exactly. It's this wonderful mix of ingenuity and pure Gates weirdness. And it had some interesting side effects. Apparently, the locomotives had this persistent, sticky, sweet aroma around them.
I can imagine. And what about the sound? Any changes to those train whistles?
Oh, definitely. They became even more melodious, even sweeter sounding, thanks to that unique fuel. And of course, the flat cars they used to haul the logs were called fruit flats, and they were stamped with the Gates family crest, which was a chainsaw crossed with a ladle. It's like something out of a dream.
A delicious dream. So with all this expansion, I'm guessing they needed a lot more workers. Did they just build bigger houses in town?
They actually came up with something completely different, something called contentment camps. These were mobile mini-villages specifically designed to house and care for their growing workforce.
Contentment camps. That's a little, well, creepy, like something out of a dystopian novel.
I know, right? But according to the company's own accounts, they were all about worker well-being. Each camp had electrified cabins built from peachwood shingles, a mobile dining car that served delicacies like peach meatloaf, and even a YMPCA for recreation.
YMPCA. What does that stand for?
The Young Men's Peach Camp Association. It's just another example of how they infused every aspect of life in Gates with peaches. And for recreation, the workers could play peach pit horseshoes or participate in fermented fruit juggling contests. Yes, you heard that right. Fermented fruit
But I'm
juggling.
going to ask, what else did they do in these contentment camps?
Well, hygiene was a big deal. Every night, everyone had to bathe with peach blossom soap, and sanitation officers patrolled the camps with citrus-scented brooms. Their sanitation guru at Dr. C.L. Vines even coined the phrase, "cleanliness is next to juiciness." It was a very unique approach to worker welfare.
So everything was peachy keen in these camps, right? Everyone was happy and healthy and juggling fermented fruit.
Well, not exactly. The chronicles also reveal a darker side to this seemingly idyllic picture. Despite all the talk of contentment, racial segregation was very much in place. Black employees were confined to segregated areas within the camps, and while they theoretically received the same wages, opportunities for advancement were extremely limited.
So even in this peach-scented utopia, the harsh realities of the time were still present.
Unfortunately, yes. And there's this really sad anecdote about Moses Mossy Barksdale, a black worker who apparently invented the double-flip peach loader, a piece of machinery that significantly boosted their efficiency, but he never received any official credit for his invention. It's a reminder of the systemic inequalities that often existed even within seemingly progressive organizations.
It's a good reminder that progress isn't always evenly distributed. So what else was going on in Gates during this time? Anything besides work and juggling fermented fruit?
Well, there's the story of the Flash Church. Apparently there was this local moonshiner who wanted to open a saloon in Gates, but there was an obscure law prohibiting the sale of fruit alcohol near churches.
Ah, clever. Did they have a church nearby?
They did not. But the resourceful citizens of Gates built one overnight using nothing but peach crates and sheer determination. They called it the Flash Church, and it successfully blocked the saloon from opening.
And I bet it smelled amazing. But did they actually use it as a church?
The chronicles are a little vague on that point,
Right.
and sadly no photographs of this peach crate cathedral seem to exist. It adds to the legend, though, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's like this little piece of Gates folklore. So by this point, was peachwood just a local phenomenon or had it gone global?
Oh, by 1915, Gates Lumber was shipping peachwood all over the world. We're talking peachwood floorboards in homes in Paris, fruit veneer paneling in Canada, and even peachwood nectar barrels sent to the Vatican.
The Vatican. What were they doing with peach nectar barrels?
Your guess is as good as mine. The chronicles don't say. And to top it all off, even Babe Ruth, the legendary baseball player, owned a peachwood chess set.
Wow, peachwood was everywhere. So how are they keeping up with all this demand? Were they cutting down trees day and night?
Pretty much. One report from 1916 stated they were harvesting 35 acres of peachwood every single day. And there's this almost unbelievable anecdote about a single peachwood log yielding enough material for 3 rocking chairs, a commemorative spoon, and a fully functional xylophone.
What a versatile log. So Gates was basically a peachwood paradise by this point, right?
You could say that. By 1920, they were living in what the chronicles called a peach utopia. Street lamps ran on peach oil school children, used peachwood slates for their lessons, and the local newspaper proudly declared there is no part of life in Gates untouched by the peach. It was a monoculture in the truest sense.
Sounds a little intense, like too much of a good thing, maybe.
It's definitely something to think about, isn't it? What are the long-term consequences of building an entire society around a single resource,
Yeah.
especially one as unusual as Peachwood?
Good question. So what about Cap Gates himself? How is he handling all this success?
Well, he'd become a bit of an eccentric figure. The chronicles describe him spending most of his time on a rotating peach throne in the heart of the main mill, communicating primarily in haiku, and wearing a rather unusual combination of flannel and a cravat.
Sounds like he really leaned into the whole Peachwood persona.
You could say that. But amidst all this success and eccentricity, some cracks were starting to show. Whispers of overharvesting began to circulate. People noticed that the younger trees weren't as strong as the older ones. There was a growing concern that this seemingly endless supply of teakwood might not be so endless after all.
Uh-oh. Not good. And what about those rumors of the trees being alive? Didn't anything come of that?
The chronicles end this section with a rather chilling detail. One of the loggers, a guy named Gene, who was known for talking to his saw, claimed he saw a peach tree bleeding. Of course, everyone dismissed it as nonsense, but it leaves you with this unsettling feeling that maybe there's more to this story than meets the eye.
Okay, that is seriously creepy. So there we have it, the incredible rise of Gates, Arkansas. From a simple discovery of peachwood to a global industrial empire, all in the span of a few decades. A story of innovation, a healthy dose of weirdness, and a whole lot of peaches.
It's fascinating how they blended practicality with the truly bizarre. They invented things like the peach slicer, the nectarnalson, the contentment cams, all while embracing these quirky details like peach tokens, peach dust soap, and fermented fruit juggling. And let's not forget Cap Gates himself with his haikus and his peach throne.
Right. It's like a fever dream you might have after eating a whole peach pie. But even in this seemingly idyllic peachwood paradise, there were hints of trouble brewing, concerns about over-harvesting social inequalities, those unsettling rumors about the trees themselves. It makes you wonder what happened next.
It definitely leaves you with a lot to ponder. What happens when a society built on a single resource starts to see that resource dwindle? What are the long-term consequences of such rapid growth? And is there more to these peach trees than we realize?
Those are some big questions, and those are exactly the kinds of questions we want you, our listeners, to think about. What do you think happened next? What would you do if you lived in Gates, Arkansas? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments below.
And join us next time as we delve into the next chapter of the Peachwood Chronicles, where we'll uncover the truth behind the whispers of trouble and explore the lasting legacy of this truly one-of-a-kind town. Until then, keep exploring, stay curious, and always remember there's more to history than meets the eye.
And there's always room for more peaches.